Mark Zuckerberg has begun his process of effectively pledging fealty to Donald Trump and make his big pivot to sort of being Elon Musk too. And he has released this video on Instagram in which he lays out sort of some of his mistakes from the past and his plans from the future in ways which are very clear responses to not only Trump's victory, but sort of betray a certain amount of jealousy of the way in which Elon Musk has managed to use Twitter, now X, to gain a certain cultural cachet among conservatives and right-wingers. Mark Zuckerberg has donated $1 million to the Trump Transition Fund, apparently. Yeah, I believe Bezos has. Oh, we might be incorrect. Oh, okay, no, we might have been correct. Okay, on the 12th of December, he said he plans to donate $1 million to the inauguration. MPS Devil saying, are we approaching the pre-Hitler stage of history where the big capitalists align with the far right and income inequality at record levels, etc.? I mean, we are seeing all of the big tech guys lining up to throw their weight behind Trump. So I was first sent this link with the caption, the explanation, the framing that this was Mark Zuckerberg taking a bit of a pivot to try and curry favor, partly with Trump voters, I guess, but particularly with Trump himself. And nothing quite prepared me for exactly how true that was going to be. Let's give it a little bit of a watch, shall we?
Hey everyone. I want to talk about something important today, because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech.
I will say I'm not entirely sure what free expression means on Instagram, which is taking photos of sunsets.
At Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years.
Pretend name saying poke. That's why he invented it, to do free expression through the medium of you've been poked.
There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff.
Like how on the nose is this as kind of just taking the language of Elon Musk? It's kind of sad in a way. It's sort of one of the slightly nerdy kids in your class has seen something that the cool kid is doing and is kind of trying to wear that coat.
Out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people.
Like this, like the language of censorship in particular. I mean, again, I've not used Facebook in a very long time, so I can't really talk to the ways, the experience of using it at the moment. One of Facebook's big scandals, however, was the ways in which it was used as a medium for encouraging political violence, right? In Myanmar. Like the times where Facebook has failed to have good moderation, and the times in which it has allowed more political content, which is one of the things that Mark Zuckerberg has said they want to do. It has had disastrous consequences. But, we'd hate for 1% of posts to be censored.
And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
And we're going to make Farmville cool again. We're going to bring back Farmville. Pretend name saying is his argument about to be based on accidentally censoring things. I mean, that's a really good point of differentiation between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, is that Elon Musk could do this thing of going, old Twitter was censoring, and I'm like the new guy that's taking over, and I'm going to make it cool and free speechy again. Whereas Mark Zuckerberg has been running this company the whole time. So he's sort of trying to paint it as like the man, like legacy media and big government or whatever forced me into doing basic content moderation. Which is interesting because he must have seen what has happened with X in the ways in which advertisers have deserted it and in which there has been an outflow of users. It's dangerous to assume that because I or you, if you have stopped using Twitter or X, whatever, that everyone has. I'm sure it still has many users. However, lots of people still do. However, there has clearly been an outflow of users, and there has been an outflow of many of the users who were like professionals who were using it, who sort of brought it a certain level of prestige, I guess. You know, journalists, artists, like people who are sort of making stuff and using or were using Twitter as a place to share it. There has been an outflow of some of those people, at least. I guess Mark Zuckerberg is hoping that his that Facebook's monopoly is strong enough that people sort of can't give it up.
More specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US.
I wonder how much it pains him to have to say similar to X. We're going to do exactly the same thing that X does because I'm not cool now and I want to be Elon Musk. It is worse than having a fact-checking system which sometimes has to err on the side of more status quo-y responses, I would say, that you can just end up with complete nonsense and it's presented as though it were a fact check.
After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created.
Again, it's worth saying he has been running this company the whole time. He's like, oh, the newspapers made me do it. But he's just using the language of Trumpism and of Musk and of the mainstream media was trying to get me down,
especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender.
And here's where it gets... Every bit of this sort of gets worse as you watch it. Specifically calling out immigration, which, let's be clear, here is being used as a stand-in for racism, right? For conversations about race, at the very least. And gender, which he is using as a stand-in for transphobia. Like, the implications of what he is saying is that we are going to allow more racism and transphobia. I don't think there's any other way of reading that. He is kind of putting it within the language that liberalism has allowed to exist around those topics. But that is what he is signaling.
On topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms. Third, we're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes
There is, just to let you know, there is a particularly fantastic bit coming up in a moment as well.
that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms. We used to have filters that scanned for any policy violation. Now, we're going to focus those filters on tackling
bit's a little bit in the
illegal
weeds.
and high-severity violations. And for lower-severity violations, we're going to rely on someone reporting an issue before we take action. The problem
I do wonder how much of a difference that really makes. Presumably, any content which gets any kind of traction, probably at least one person reports. Like, I suppose the distinction really there is, like, does something get flagged even if no one's likely to see it? I guess is probably the difference. Yeah, Star Spangled Shitlog saying, oh wow, not even trying to hide it. I mean, yeah, this is very much him going, I'm actually on board with the kind of Maga agenda now. I'm in with the, you know, the anti-woke, the anti-elite kind of gang, even though I'm effectively a modern-day media baron.
The problem is that the filters make mistakes, and they take down a lot of content that they shouldn't. So by dialing them back, we're going to dramatically reduce the amount of censorship on our platforms. We're also going to tune our content filters to require much higher confidence before taking down content. The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down. Fourth, we're bringing back civic content. For a while, the community asked to see less politics because it was making people stressed. So we stopped recommending these posts. But it feels like we're in a new era now, and we're starting to get feedback that people want to see this content again. So we're going to start phasing this back into Facebook, Instagram, and Threads while working to keep the communities friendly.
I wonder whether that's particularly Threads has maybe just fallen between... Because Blue Sky is really interesting. I mean, somehow my Blue Sky, the stuff that seems to get recommended to me on Blue Sky is really like hardcore British centrism. So it's people who are really into being anti-Brexit and being anti-Trump and being anti-Tory, but that's like their whole politics. They don't really have a positive politics. They don't really have a thing that they campaign for. They just don't like the baddies, and sort of harken back to a fictional era in which politics was sort of nice, I guess, and that's really interesting, right? That there are very clearly people who are on Blue Sky because they see it as a sort of liberal space. But there are clearly people who are choosing to use Blue Sky because they see it as a space for extreme centrism. Just as there are people who are using X because they see it as the free speech warrior space for the right-wing truth tellers or whatever. And I do wonder whether Mark Zuckerberg is noticing some of that and going, okay, what do I make Threads? Like, no one is like, oh, I'm a kind of Threads person. Like, there is culture war. There is a culture war logic to being able to pick Blue Sky or X. Threads doesn't really have a place for that.
And positive. Fifth, we're going to move our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California, and our US-based content review is going to be based in Texas.
This is like the funniest one to me. It's just real. It's just real. I've like, I can't even put it into words. It's just real, like, picking the Republican place. Stone Corbell saying labor laws are worse in Texas. I'm certain that is part of it as well. But, you know, the real win here is the PR win of Texas is seen as Republican. And it's in this kind of geographical there is a geographical lens to how we talk about politics these days. California and New York, right? The coastal elites, or in the UK, it's sort of the London centrist elites, the sort of London lovies, right? Whereas real people live in Texas.
As we work to promote free expression, I think that it will help us build trust to do this work in places where there is less concern about the bias of our teams. Finally, we're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more.
Ooh.
The US has the strongest...
That feels like a push against the EU and some of the digital bills
constitutional protections for free expression in the world. Europe has an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there. Latin American countries have secret courts that can order companies to quietly...
That's really interesting that there's a cut there. I don't think there's one
things
before
down.
that.
China has censored our apps from even working in the country. The only way that we can push back on this global trend is with the support of the US government. And that's why it's been so difficult over the past 4 years when even the US government has pushed for censorship. By going after us and other American companies,
Oh, sure. I hadn't watched this far through, but he is really making a break for this. He is really like, I'm on board with the don't worry, guys.
Has emboldened other governments to go even further. But now we have the opportunity to restore free expression, and I am excited to take it. It'll take time to get this right, and these are complex systems. They're never going to be perfect. There's also a lot of illegal stuff that we still need to work very hard to remove. But the bottom line is that after years of having our content moderation work focus primarily on removing content, it is time to focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our systems, and getting back to our roots about giving people voice. I'm looking forward to this next chapter. Stay good out there, and more to come soon.
I mean, this is fascinating on so many levels, right? There's the aspect in which Mark Zuckerberg is very clearly trying to ape Elon Musk. He's late to the party, right? But he's trying to get there too. There's an aspect in which he is saying, I'm a useful asset in terms of foreign policy, where he's talking about Facebook pushing back against other countries' attempts to censor or whatever. He's effectively saying, actually, we're gonna, if there are legal challenges to what we are doing or are not doing in other countries, we're gonna fight back against them. We're gonna ignore them, whatever. But one of the really interesting aspect about Trump's term last time was that he did do a reasonable amount of antitrust stuff, right? So like anti-monopoly actions in which his Department of Justice went after certain companies for being monopolies. Now, it's worth saying what companies they went after was very much influenced, maybe entirely influenced, by whether Trump likes those companies or not. So Google, is seen as a Californian hotbed of liberals, right? Silicon Valley liberalism. And so they went after Google. There was always the danger that they might go after Facebook, right? Facebook is also a hotbed of Silicon Valley liberalism, right? It very much has that vibe. And so one of the reasons that all of these CEOs, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg making this very clear pitch that he is part of the Maga coalition, right? That's what he's saying. He's saying, I am part of this political movement too, right? We've also seen Jeff Bezos, a cartoon featuring Jeff Bezos, which was drawn for the Washington Post, was not published. Whether that is that Jeff Bezos himself has stepped in and said that's not going to get published, whether someone further down the line has gone, well, I don't want to upset Jeff Bezos, or I don't want to upset my boss who doesn't want to upset his boss who doesn't want to upset Jeff Bezos. There is a bit of political thinking that has gone on there, which has gone, as an organization, the Washington Post and the Washington Post in and of itself, but also as part of a family of companies that are associated with Jeff Bezos, doesn't want to upset Donald Trump, right? Because Amazon doesn't want to get broken up as a monopoly. Facebook doesn't want to get broken up as a monopoly. Apple has also made a donation to the inauguration fund. So in this video, in all those donations, what we're seeing is actually all of these companies all of these CEOs who are CEOs of companies which are monopolies, or to split hairs, have power within the market which is monopolistic or oligopolistic or whatever we want to say. They are genuinely worried that if they're not seen to be on side, that Donald Trump, and maybe with Elon Musk, will try to break them up as monopolies, right? Will use the antitrust powers that he was sort of in the process of using last time, and in which Joe Biden was fairly enthusiastic on some antitrust stuff as well, because it's hard not to be in an era where there are so many companies which are clearly approaching monopoly status at the very least, and in ways that are advanced in comparison to the way in which monopolies could have worked 30 or 40 years ago. Right, because Facebook being a monopoly, it's not the same as if there was only one news. If we view Facebook as a kind of media organization, it's not akin to there only being one TV channel or one newspaper in a country. It's akin to effectively there only being one way of broadcast, it's like there being multiple newspapers, but all of the shops that sell newspapers and could possibly sell newspapers are owned by the same company. Amazon is not just a monopoly in the sense of being one company that sells one product and is dominant in that particular market. It is a monopoly in the sense that, imagine if all of the supermarkets in your country were the same supermarket. I mean, there is sort of an argument that what we've built for ourselves is kind of like an even worse. Maybe that's contrarian to say. We have sort of built East Germany again. Yeah, there's a book about it's called The People's Republic of Walmart, which looks at the idea that we have a centralized, as Cat Pig's saying, we have a planned economy rather than a free market. It just happens to not be planned by governments. It's planned by the Mark Zuckerbergs, or particularly the Jeff Bezoses of this world. What we're seeing is CEOs of companies that are aware that Donald Trump kind of has antitrust crackdowns as a stick that he might beat them with, and therefore, in the interests of their own preservation, if nothing else, they are donating to his funds, they are making it clear that they are on side. And it's going to be interesting to see where this goes from. I mean, it's going to be interesting given how international so many of these companies are. Mark Zuckerberg talking in that video there about how, Facebook is this international company. We're going to push back against the EU. We're going to push back against other countries that are going to try and tell us what to do in their jurisdictions. He's sort of saying, we can be I don't know whether he's saying we can be a vector for, US propaganda across the world or whatever, but he is saying, we can make sure that American norms around conversation and around the ways in which speech is elevated or suppressed or whatever, or moderated, can exist elsewhere regardless of what governments or voters in those countries want to happen. And so one does wonder what the international impact of some of that are going to be, because as we're seeing with Musk, there are some quite direct political consequences of that. If Musk and Zuckerberg are, in order to please Trump, they are redesigning their platforms in ways which are going to encourage and allow and enable more anti-immigration and conversations around gender, right? These kind of euphemisms that Zuckerberg is using, that has the potential to have quite direct political consequences in terms of electing parties and politicians who are Trump-like in other countries. So whether that's the AfD in Germany, whether that's Reform in the UK, whether that's the Front National.